Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
An overhaul to the federal workforce's performance management system is now set in stone. A final rule from the Office of Personnel Management removes a previous ban on using forced distribution systems. It also prohibits employees from challenging the ratings they receive. OPM's new rule marks the first major update to performance management in decades. Here with more is Federal News Network's Drew Friedman. Drew, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Terry.
This rule is now final. What really changes here?
Well, a lot of things are going to change under this final rule, and a lot of this was expected from OPM's proposed regulations earlier this year. But a couple things, as you mentioned, one of the biggest changes is removing that ban on a forced distribution system. So what that's going to do going forward is require agencies to limit how many employees can receive a 4 or 5 on the 5-point rating scale for the federal workforce. There will be no limits on how many employees can receive lower level ratings, however. There's also some other changes to eliminate level 2 of that 5-point scale, which is one of the 2 unsatisfactory levels. OPM just says that it's removing it because it believes it's redundant. There's also removing the ability for employees to contest their performance ratings through grievance and arbitration proceedings, which are typically done through a federal union representative. That's no longer going to be a possibility for employees under this new final rule. A couple other things is that OPM is going to have to review agencies' performance rating systems and how well they're implementing these changes every other year. And then supervisors are going to see some changes as well to their own performance reviews. They'll have to complete additional training. So the list is pretty long here, but it's really just a full overhaul of the performance management system in government.
And as you said, this has been coming down the pike for a while. What was OPM's justification for a really comprehensive overhaul here?
It definitely comes back to some common talking points that we hear from the Trump administration about federal workforce policy. For example, they're talking a lot about driving what they call a culture of accountability and just trying to hold federal employees to higher performance standards. They also have talked about what they say is persistent rating inflation of federal employees' performance over time. They've pointed to some older reports from the Government Accountability Office and the Merit Systems Protection Board that show there's a large majority of federal employees who receive high ratings on their performance reviews and relatively few who receive lower or unsatisfactory ratings. And OPM, their argument using that evidence says that employee performance ratings, therefore, don't really reflect the true breakdown of federal workforce performance, and there needs to be a more rigorous system for making clearer distinctions between levels of performance between employees.
Walk us through the steps of getting to this final rule.
Well, we did have the proposed regulations earlier this year. As I mentioned, this wasn't a total surprise to see the final rule come out, and there were relatively limited changes between the proposed and final regulations. But we've also seen more broadly some changes to performance management systems. For example, a separate final rule for the senior executive service and making some similar changes there. And then also this is really just building on initial guidance in 2025 from the Trump administration, which had initially told agencies to begin limiting top performance ratings and also implementing a system of faster discipline for employees who are deemed poor performers. So there's really just it's a part of a larger effort towards just making stricter performance ratings and changing the system overall here.
And as this process has moved forward, what has been the reaction from the federal community?
We've heard a lot of concerns from public commenters on the proposed regulations, for example, from different employee organizations, different federal unions who worry about a lot of negative consequences of these changes. They talk, for instance, about issues coming down on morale, coming down on productivity, teamwork between employees, and just having a real negative impact on the workplace culture. There's also concerns about the forced distribution system and just requiring essentially certain numbers or amounts of employees at the top levels could lead to unfair comparisons between employees, could lead to some subjectivity or bias, even some politically motivated types of reviews for people. And then also concerns of a loss of due process. So by removing the arbitration and grievance proceedings, some of the unions were arguing that that would essentially remove what employees have a right to do, which is to be able to challenge a performance review that they believe is unfair or not accurately reflective of their work. So really just overall a lot of concerns across the board there. And then also that there may be some legal concerns that this violates the Civil Service Reform Act as well.
Well, it's hard to believe we're already in the fourth quarter of this fiscal year, but that means that the rating cycle will be coming up pretty quickly. Is this all in place now for that rating cycle, and what comes next?
One of the changes that OPM made for the final rule is to actually delay the implementation timeline slightly. So instead of the fiscal year in September of this year, we're actually going to see these deadline for these changes to take effect in January 1st, 2027. So agencies have a couple extra months to make these changes. I think it was just a concern over, these are pretty significant and a pretty significant overhaul of the system. So it's just going to take some more time to make those changes. But once agencies are in compliance, these changes apply to the vast majority of the federal workforce. So we're going to see a pretty significant shift here by early 2027 for sure.
That's Federal News Network's Drew Friedman. Drew, thanks for this update.
Thank you, Terry.
You can find her full story at federalnewsnetwork.com.